Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining us today for our Little Italy of LA podcast. I'm your host, Deborah Zara Kobylt, and please welcome Natosha Fortini. You are the creator of Italian Citizenship DIY. I'm so thrilled to have you join us because this is a big topic, a confusing topic for me as well. So we're going to have you break down the possibilities of becoming an Italian citizen if your family originated from Italy, right?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So let's talk about why you started this and what is it? How do you help people go through the steps to become a citizen
Yeah,
of Italy?
a number of years ago, I started my own citizenship journey, and I really quickly became overwhelmed with all of the rules and all of the information that's floating around on the internet. Especially because a lot of it is incorrect. And I wasted a lot of time going down paths that were not relevant to my specific application. And so I thought, there's no way I can do this. I need help. So I
Hmm.
contacted a number of different agencies that assist with dual citizenship. I was quoted astronomical fees.
Hmm.
For my situation, it was about like $8,000 to $10,000. And that just wasn't accessible for me. So I persevered, sorry, with under a lot of frustration, and I got my application done. But I still sort of hung around the dual citizenship community online. Still tried to help people with questions, give advice. I helped my own family members, some friends with their applications. And I just noticed that people had the same questions and they were getting
Right.
stuck in the same spots. And, some of them were just abandoning their applications altogether. And so I thought, there has got to be another way. And so Italian Citizenship DIY was born. And so what
Yeah.
I do is I personally coach people through a guided DIY program. So I will
Hmm.
give you the tools and the resources and the information that is directly relevant to your application. And then I will walk you step by step through the whole process and give you one-on-one support so that you can be successful in completing your application without, the overwhelming struggle or the financial burden.
Okay. You say you give us the tools. What are those tools that you give us?
Yeah. So, for example, a stage that a lot of people get stuck on is contacting Italy because, as part of your application, you do need to provide your ancestors' records from their hometown in Italy. There are some people who don't speak Italian and they don't even know how to go about sending that request. Where in
Hmm.
Italy are these records kept? How do I contact them? What do I have to have in my application? What kind of letter do I have to send? Like, I can't write Italian. What do I do? And so I will give you all of that. I sort of create a big spreadsheet when we first sit down together, and I put in all of the relevant links, all of the relevant contact information. I have Italian language templates that are fill in the blanks. So all you have to do is really simply just fill in your ancestors' information, and then you can put your application together and send that off to Italy, for example.
What what kind of information is needed from Italy? Obviously, birth records, right? Could you sort of list some of them?
Sure. So, any life events of your Italian ancestor that took place while they lived in Italy. So, mostly that's going to be birth records. And then if your ancestor also was married before they
Hmm.
emigrated from Italy, you'll also need their marriage records. Now, sometimes it's not super common, but sometimes people will have Italian ancestors that came from Italy, immigrated to the U.S., and then at some time later in life, they might have gone back to Italy, and
Hmm.
maybe they passed away there. And so in that case, you would also need a death record. So any vital record for a life event that took place while they were in Italy needs to be submitted as part of your application.
Now, there's a few things I want to go over, so I'm just going to start listing them, right?
Sure.
Um, can you go through your mother's side or father's side? Meaning my grandparents on either side. And does it have to be the grandfather, the grandmother, both? Like, how does that work? Because that's where it gets tricky, and that's where it gets tricky for me, right?
Yeah, so you can go through either a maternal line or a paternal line. It you're eligible through both lineages, but there are some different rules that pertain to citizenship lines that include females, and so there's some certain dates to be aware of. And it doesn't mean that if you don't meet these dates that you cannot apply for citizenship. It just means you need to do it in a different way. So there's a different process.
And you also explain that, right? Right? Like, if you run into this roadblock, here's what you do next. Is that correct?
Oh, of course. That's a big part of the one-on-one coaching. And that's what's lacking sort of in other programs, and why people get stuck. It's because you don't have that one-on-one coaching. You don't have somebody to ask questions to sort of guide you through the process.
Best way for me to do this and explain it to the folks out there that are watching and listening is, to be honest, use myself as an example, right? My grandfather on my father's side, he came over here, and honestly, I have to find this out. I believe that they were married first and then came here. And I believe he had to renounce his citizenship at the time, because he became a US citizen, right? That's on my father's side. Now, on my mother's side, I have to find this out because I know he came here. I think he married here. I'm not even sure if he became a citizen and renounced his citizenship. Like, it's confusing. What if you renounce your citizenship, right? Let's talk about my grandfather on my father's side. Then what happens?
Yeah, so part of the process of determining if you are eligible for Italian citizenship by descent is figuring out those naturalization dates. So, did your Italian ancestor become a US citizen, or did they not? And if they did, when did they become a US citizen? So, you will need to find some naturalization records. If you don't have family members and whatnot that you can ask, then you can certainly go online. There are some older records that are available digitally. So for you, in your case, you have your paternal grandfather that came over from Italy to the US, and then your father was born in the US. So in order to be eligible, the basic rule of thumb is that your grandfather, your paternal grandfather, would have still had to be an Italian citizen when your father was born in the US. So your grandfather could not have become a US citizen prior to your father being born, because that would have broken the bloodline. Because the way that Italian citizenship works is that it's passed down through blood. So it doesn't matter where you were born. If your parent has Italian citizenship and that line is still intact, they pass that citizenship on to you.
Now, what about his wife? What if the rules don't apply to him, right? And I have to get my dates straight, but I'm doing this for the purposes of the people out there that might have something similar. Could I then jump over and go to his wife and see, hey, did she become a citizen or no? Was she considered his property at the time? Do you know what I mean?
Yes, so that's a great question. So you are eligible to use your maternal lines as well, but there are a few dates to keep in under consideration. So you may know that in 1946, Italians voted in a referendum to replace the monarchy with a republic, and so on January 1st, 1948. Italy got a new constitution. So there are two important ways that this new constitution affects citizenship by descent. So firstly, prior to January 1st, 1948, a woman did not have autonomy over her own citizenship status. So her citizenship status was determined by that of her husband. So for example, this means that if an Italian woman married a non-Italian man, or if an Italian husband naturalized as a citizen of another country, that woman involuntarily lost her Italian citizenship. So this is prior to 1948. So if your grandparents came over, say so if your grandparents came over from Italy and had your grandfather naturalized, it really depends whether you still had a viable line through your grandmother. Really depends on the date that your grandfather became a citizen, because the U.S. had different laws regarding a female retaining her own citizenship status. It gets a little bit confusing to go through in detail. It's a little bit complex, but you do have to also take into consideration the laws of the country that your female ancestor naturalized in. So in the US, this would be the Cable Act. So as of September 1922, a woman in the US a foreign woman whose husband was naturalizing as a US citizen, she would not automatically naturalize with her husband. So after September 1922, in order to become a US citizen, she would have to naturalize voluntarily under her own application. So even though Italian law stated that before January 1st, 1948, a woman would have lost her citizenship if her husband naturalized, because US laws protected a woman's citizenship status as of September 1922, your female ancestor, in your case, let's say your grandmother, would have retained her Italian citizenship. And so therefore you may have a viable line through her.
Now go ahead, please.
So I did want to say this is sort of a good segue into the second way that the what we call the 1948 law can affect citizenship by descent claims, because prior to January 1st, 1948, a woman wasn't able to transmit her Italian citizenship to her offspring. So citizenship was actually only passed from father to child. So if your only Italian ancestor was a female who had her child prior to 1948, then she could not have passed on her Italian citizenship. So in your case, let's say your grandmother was in a situation where she retained her Italian citizenship. She didn't naturalize with her husband in the US, but your father was still born before January 1st, 1948. Even though your grandmother was still Italian, she could not have passed on that citizenship to her father under the current Italian law.
You mean to my father?
That's right, to your father. So, what this means for people of Italian descent who are tracing their line through a female ancestor is that you have to dig a little bit deeper. You need to know these really important dates, because if a situation like this applies to you, say where you are not eligible through your paternal grandfather, but your paternal grandmother still retained her Italian citizenship, then you would have to go through a different process. So you can't apply at your local consulate or directly in Italy. You would need the help of an Italian lawyer, and you would have to go through a judicial process. So it's not all hope is not lost. It's just a little bit of a different process that you would have to go through in order to obtain dual citizenship.
Right. And of course, many Italian citizens had to renounce their citizenship, right, to become US citizens, which was the case with my paternal grandfather that I do know about. Isn't it true that Americans can now get a lawyer and sort of fight that, right, in a court of law in Italy? Is that correct? Because wouldn't the argument be, I want to become a citizen, it's my right, it's my lineage, and it's not my fault the politics got in the way? Am I right about that?
So that, I think, you're talking about the 1948 case. So that is what you do. It's actually brought before the court in Italy, and you are arguing that the the citizenship lines through female should have remained intact, that it was discriminatory towards women. And so that is what you're doing with the 1948 case when you are bringing that case to Italy through a judicial process.
I was actually talking about my grandfather, right? He renounced his citizenship completely, but doesn't it mean that I could then, if I wanted to, hire someone to help me in a court of law in Italy and say, but, you know, he didn't want to have to do that. He did it because he had to become a citizen, because he wasn't allowed to become a dual citizen at the time. In other words, could you fight that in Italy? Because I read that you could, but I'm by far no expert because I'm still confused about this.
Yeah, so unfortunately, no. So
no. Okay.
No. So the judicial process only pertains to 1948 cases in that context, in terms of losing their citizenship. That was only for females in a 1948 case. If your Italian ancestor, like your grandfather, let's just say your paternal grandfather, became a US citizen before your father was born, that line unfortunately was cut, because in order to pass down Italian citizenship from one generation to the next, you have to have Italian blood. And when he became a US citizen, he had to forfeit his Italian citizenship. So he no longer had Italian blood when your father was born.
Right. But if he's born before that, he did have Italian blood.
Correct.
Good. There's hope for me, because I told you this has confused me. And, you know, I'm pretty good with research. I do a good job with research, but this has stumped me as well. So you actually are really good at describing what we need to do and the dates and what to be clear about. So it's actually, this is very helpful. What about, I believe, 1992 is a big date too. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, so 1992. In 1992 is the year that Italy started recognizing somebody voluntarily holding dual citizenship. So it sort of connects what you were saying before about your grandfather became a US citizen and had to renounce, or he had to give up, he had to forfeit his Italian citizenship. So very few people actually formally renounced their Italian citizenship. What that refers to is renouncing your Italian citizenship in front of a government official, saying, I no longer want to be Italian. Very few people ever did that. How they lost their Italian citizenship was by becoming a citizen of another country. Because prior to 1992, Italy did not recognize the voluntary holdings of more than one citizenship. So if you became the citizen of another country, that means you cease to become Italian.
Under Italian law, don't they consider me a citizen of Italy because the blood runs through my veins on both sides of my family entirely? Is that true? And it's up to me now to prove how I can become a resident or a dual citizen, correct? But they do consider me a citizen of Italy, right?
Yeah, so it's actually a really neat concept. So if you are eligible for Italian citizenship by descent, so if your bloodline has not been broken, then you actually have been an Italian citizen since birth, but you're just unrecognized. So your citizenship is not official, right? Because the Italian government does not know that you exist. You have never been registered within Italy. You received Italian citizenship. You would have received it from your parent when you were born. So what you're doing when you are applying for Italian citizenship, it's not actually an application. It's not an application as somebody who would, if I up and moved to Australia and lived there for a requisite number of years and wanted to become a citizen based on residency. That's a completely different process. What you are actually doing with Italian citizenship when you apply is you're applying to have the citizenship that you already have recognized by the Italian government.
That's actually, you're right, because that is very different than applying for a visa or a work visa. and then applying through citizenship that way. This is through my bloodline, my legacy, right? What is it
Yeah.
called? What is that called then?
So we refer to it as Italian citizenship by descent or iure sanguinis.
Talk to us about the benefits of being an Italian citizen, a dual citizen, if you will.
Oh, okay. So there are many, and depending on what is important to you, one or two may resonate more than others. But some big ones are that as an Italian citizen, you are a European Union citizen as well. So that can have some really big implications for people, as it allows you to live or work or study in Italy or in the EU without going through really drawn out visa processes and all the paperwork and the time and money that entails. So you do have a lot of freedoms associated with that. And some people want it for a very practical reason, want their citizenship. Like they might work for an employer that has some global offices within the EU, and it'd be very easy for them to move around. Maybe they're a digital nomad and they can work from anywhere. Some people, perhaps they have a vacation home, or they aspire to have a vacation home in Italy in retirement. So if you're not an EU citizen, you would only be able to stay in Italy for 90 days at a time, or anywhere within the Schengen agreement zone. You can only stay for 90 days at a time, and you'd have to leave for 90 days before you can come back. So this also opens up the possibilities for people who might want to spend part of the year in Italy or within the EU, so that they don't have those time restrictions. And then of course, there's always just the ability to reconnect with your heritage as well.
Right. And plus you can study there, right? Much easier. Education's phenomenal. Healthcare, should you want to go over there and receive healthcare there, that's a big plus too, right?
It is, yes. So as a resident in Italy, so you would have to be a resident citizen in Italy, but you can certainly access their healthcare as well, which is a really big benefit for for people who might live, their home country is might have really expensive healthcare. So that is a big consideration for a lot of people.
Right. And I could also pass it down, or someone can pass it down to their children then, right? Quite easily. Like, let's say I were to become a citizen of Italy in addition to the US, then my child could very easily apply for dual citizenship, right?
That's correct. So if you were a citizen at birth and you're eligible for citizenship, then as long as nothing else happened down the line, then to break that citizenship, then everybody else down the line would be eligible as well. So your children would also be eligible. Most of the time, it doesn't apply for all consulates, but most of the time, if you are applying and you have children under the age of 18, typically you would submit their birth certificates along with your own application, and they would be recognized along with you. So they don't need their own application. So that's how it works the majority of the time. There are a few consulates that are outliers, but if your children are over the age of 18, then they would need their own appointments and their own application.
Do you advise starting with your local consulate? Because how many Italian consulates are there throughout the US?
Oh, yeah. So there are a handful, and it really depends on. So you have to apply at the consulate that has jurisdiction over where you have permanent residency. So, for example, you can't live in Florida and say, well, Detroit has they don't have a long wait time. I'm just making this up. Detroit doesn't have a long wait time. I'm going to go apply in Detroit instead. You can't do that. You would have to apply in Miami. So you don't have a choice of consulate. You have to apply at the consulate that has jurisdiction over where you have permanent residency. And so sometimes, as luck may have it, your consulate may be one that is really busy, and appointment times take years and years to get. There are some consulates that are booking right now into 2024, 2025.
Oh boy.
Yes. And so some people can, they also make the choice to say, well, I want to move to Italy anyway. I'm retired. I'd like to move over there anyway. I'm just going to move and I'm going to apply when I get there. So that's also an option to apply directly in Italy at the town hall of wherever you're living. So that's also an option.
But the first step in the U.S. here is the consulate, the Italian consulate, right?
Yes. So if you have a case that is eligible to be submitted at a consulate, so if you have a case that has those 1948 implications where
Right.
a female ancestor, might have lost her citizenship or couldn't transmit it to her child, you may not have a choice, and you would have to use a lawyer and go through a judicial process in Italy. But if you don't have one of those cases and you
Right.
do not want to apply in Italy, then you would apply at your local consulate. So that would be after determining your eligibility, then the next step would be figuring out what your consulate is and then going to their website, and they typically have an outline of their application requirements.
You have been so helpful. So let's talk about you for a moment.
Sure.
You have a Facebook group that pretty much anyone can join, right? If you tell us the name of the Facebook group, and then how can people get in touch with you should they want you to take it a step further and have you help them and do that sort of thing?
Yeah, so I do have a Facebook group. It's called How to Complete Your Dual Italian Citizenship Application. And everybody is welcome to join. And in that group, we have lots of conversations. You can make posts with all of your questions. I'm always in there every single day answering questions and helping people. And I also do a live video every Sunday. So it's 1 p.m. Eastern, so I guess that would be 10 a.m. Pacific time. I do a half an hour or so live session, and I talk about different topics related to dual Italian citizenship and also the application process. So you can come on live and with your questions, and I will answer them there. You can also reach me. I'm on Instagram at Italian Citizenship DIY. And I also have a Facebook page of the same name, Italian Citizenship DIY. And then, of course, you can always find my website and contact me through there as well.
And that's the name of the website, Italian Citizenship DIY. Great name, I have to tell you. It's easy because you want to do it yourself, right? Yes. It's less expensive. And to be honest, half the time you have to get these papers anyway on your own to submit them. So you just give us the extra push and the extra information that we need, like, hey, I'm stumped. What do I do here? And then you'll have that information, right? The agency to contact, who to call, when to call, the translation. I mean, I think this is really terrific. I learned a lot from you. I really did. I'm not quite as intimidated. I've got to go for it because this is something I've been wanting for a long time. I put a stop to it, and now I'm going to go for it. Besides, my kids are encouraging me. So, because they feel very close to their Italian heritage as well.
Yep, that's fantastic.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Natosha Fortini of Italian Citizenship DIY. Please look her up. You can reach out to her on her website, Instagram, Facebook, as she's told you. And it's really worth it to just sort of start because that's who we are, right, everybody? That's who we are. So thank you for joining us today on our Little Italy of LA podcast. And we will be reaching out to you, and I'll probably be reaching out to you personally myself. So thank you. See you all next time, everybody. My name is Zara Kobylt. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.